The letter was waiting on the millionaire's desk at 6:12 on a Monday morning, and within 3 hours, his company would be closer to collapse than it had ever been. There was no signature, no return address, and no explanation, only 7 handwritten words that made his blood run cold: "They are stealing your company from you." He had received anonymous letters before, but this one was different. It contained a warning about a transaction that only 3 people in the entire company knew about. Someone inside his organization knew exactly what was happening, and whoever that person was had been watching from the shadows. For years, people had looked at Adrian Vale and seen only success. At 46, he was the owner of Vale Meridian Group, a company that had grown from a small technology firm into a powerful international business. His name appeared in magazines, on conference stages, and beneath photographs of luxury buildings bearing his company's logo. People assumed his life was effortless. They saw the tailored suits, the expensive cars, the penthouse overlooking the city, and the private meetings with powerful executives. What they never saw was the empty chair across from him at his dinner table, the old photograph of his late father sitting beside his bed, or the quiet fear he carried every night that everything he had built could disappear as quickly as it had arrived. Adrian had inherited the company after his father died unexpectedly 8 years earlier. The transition had not been easy. His father had built the business slowly, treating employees like family and refusing to believe that profit was the only measure of success. Adrian had admired him, but he had also wanted to prove that he could take the company further. Under Adrian's leadership, revenue multiplied, international contracts followed, and the company became one of the most respected firms in the city. Yet somewhere along the way, something changed. The company became bigger, colder, and more complicated. There were new executives, new departments, new policies, and hundreds of employees Adrian barely knew by name. Then the letters began. The first arrived in an ordinary white envelope. It warned him that someone in his finance department was manipulating internal numbers. Adrian dismissed it as a malicious attempt to create distrust. The second letter arrived 2 weeks later. It contained details about an upcoming acquisition that had not yet been announced publicly. The third warned him about a senior executive who was secretly transferring company assets through a chain of shell companies. Adrian investigated each warning quietly. Each time, something was wrong. The finance department had indeed been hiding irregular transactions. The acquisition team had indeed concealed a major liability. And the senior executive mentioned in the third letter had been moving money through accounts Adrian had never known existed. The anonymous writer had been right every time. But instead of feeling grateful, Adrian became suspicious. He began to wonder whether the person sending the letters was part of the conspiracy itself. Perhaps someone was feeding him selected truths to manipulate his decisions. Perhaps the letters were designed to make him distrust the wrong people while the real criminals continued their work. Then came the fourth letter. It warned him that someone close to him was preparing to force him out of his own company. That morning, Adrian sat alone in his office, staring at the paper while rain slid down the floor to ceiling windows behind him. The city looked gray and distant. His hands rested on the desk, but he could feel his pulse beating through his fingers. He had spent his entire life believing that wealth gave people security. That morning, he realized it could also make it impossible to know whom to trust. And before we continue, if you believe that kindness, second chances, and doing the right thing still matter, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs a little hope, leave a comment, and subscribe to Kindness Speaks. Your support helps us bring more emotional stories of courage, kindness, and unexpected heroes to people who need them. Adrian called his chief financial officer and ordered a confidential investigation. He gave no explanation for the request. Within days, the results were disturbing. Millions of dollars were being diverted from several company accounts. The transactions were carefully disguised as consulting fees, equipment purchases, and overseas development costs. Someone was draining the company from the inside. And whoever was responsible understood the company's systems well enough to hide it. Adrian tightened security. Access to financial records was restricted. Passwords were changed. Executives were questioned individually. Surveillance was increased around sensitive departments. Yet the letters continued. The fifth one appeared inside his locked office. That was when Adrian stopped sleeping properly. He checked security footage. Nobody had entered his office during the relevant period. The cameras showed employees walking through the hallway, security guards making their rounds, and cleaning staff moving through the building late at night. One person appeared repeatedly. A cleaner. Her name was Elena Brooks. She was 58 years old, widowed, and had worked at Vale Meridian Group for almost 11 years. Adrian knew almost nothing about her. He had seen her hundreds of times without really seeing her. She was usually pushing a gray cleaning cart through hallways before executives arrived. She wore a simple navy uniform, comfortable black shoes, and kept her dark gray hair tied neatly behind her head. She was quiet, polite, and almost invisible in the enormous building. But now Adrian noticed her. And once he started noticing her, he began seeing things he had never paid attention to before. Elena always arrived before dawn. She always worked late. She knew which executives stayed after hours. She knew which conference rooms were being used. She knew which offices were usually empty. And, perhaps most importantly, she had access to places most employees never thought about. Adrian's suspicion hardened. One evening, he stayed in his office long after everyone else had left. Around 10:40 p.m., he heard the soft sound of wheels moving along the hallway. Elena appeared with her cleaning cart. She paused outside his office. For several seconds, she stood completely still. Then she looked through the glass wall. Adrian watched her from inside. Their eyes met. Elena looked startled. She lowered her gaze and continued walking. Adrian said nothing. But the next morning, another letter appeared. This one contained a single sentence. Stop looking at the people who cannot afford to betray you. Adrian read it 3 times. Then he looked at the security footage. Elena was there again. For the first time, he wondered whether the quiet cleaner pushing a cart through his building every night might know far more than anyone realized. Elena, meanwhile, was living a life that had nothing to do with luxury. She lived in a small apartment on the edge of the city with her 19-year-old granddaughter, Mia. Elena had raised Mia after her daughter died years earlier, and everything she did was for the young woman she considered the last piece of her family. Her apartment was clean but modest. The kitchen table had scratches along its edges. The refrigerator made a strange humming sound. The heating system worked only when it felt like cooperating. Elena kept a small envelope hidden inside an old recipe book. Inside were the savings she had collected over 11 years of cleaning offices. She was saving for Mia's nursing school. Every extra shift went into that envelope. Every holiday she worked. Every time she skipped buying something for herself. She never complained. But there was another reason Elena knew so much about Vale Meridian Group. Before becoming a cleaner, she had worked for 17 years in accounting. She had been excellent at her job. She understood financial statements, procurement systems, audit trails, and the tiny inconsistencies that often revealed large crimes. But after her husband became ill, Elena left the corporate world to care for him. After he died, she struggled to find work again. Companies wanted younger employees. They wanted newer qualifications. They wanted people who fit into polished offices. Elena eventually accepted a cleaning position at Vale Meridian Group. Nobody asked about her past. Nobody asked what she knew. And Elena was content to remain unnoticed. Until one night, she saw something she could not ignore. It happened shortly after midnight. Elena was cleaning a conference room on the 32nd floor when she heard voices coming from an adjacent office. The door was partially closed. She recognized one voice immediately. It belonged to Victor Hale, the company's chief operating officer. Victor was one of Adrian's most trusted executives. Elena heard him discussing money. Not ordinary company money. Millions. She froze. She quietly stopped cleaning and listened. Victor was speaking with another man about transferring control of a subsidiary before an upcoming board meeting. They discussed creating enough financial damage to make the company appear unstable. Once the stock price dropped, a group of investors would purchase enough shares to gain control. The plan was enormous. And frighteningly close to completion. Elena knew she should tell someone. But whom? If she went directly to Adrian, nobody might believe her. She was a cleaner. Victor was an executive who had worked beside Adrian for more than a decade. Who would the company trust? The wealthy executive in the tailored suit? Or the woman who pushed a cleaning cart? Elena went home that night carrying a fear she could barely explain. For 2 days, she said nothing. Then she remembered something her husband had once told her. When people underestimate you, they often reveal things they would never reveal if they knew you were listening. Elena began quietly collecting evidence. She noticed discarded documents in recycling bins. She remembered dates. She wrote down names. She watched which executives entered which rooms. She never stole anything. She never broke into anything. She simply paid attention. And because everyone believed she was invisible, nobody noticed. Her first letter to Adrian took nearly an hour to write. She used her left hand to disguise her handwriting. She gave him only enough information to investigate. She didn't tell him who she was. She didn't want praise. She didn't want money. She wanted to stop the company from being destroyed. But the investigation became dangerous. Victor eventually realized someone was interfering with his plans. He did not know Elena was responsible. Instead, he began looking for the anonymous source. He ordered employees to watch the security cameras. He questioned assistants. He reviewed access logs. Eventually, he noticed something strange. The letters always appeared after Elena had worked late. Victor began following her movements. One evening, Elena discovered him standing near the service elevator. He asked why she was always in the building after midnight. She smiled politely and said that some floors took longer to clean. Victor stared at her. Then he walked away. Elena knew she was in danger. Still, she continued. The 6th letter reached Adrian the morning before the board meeting. It contained the account number where the stolen money had been transferred. Adrian's legal team traced it. The account was real. The money was real. And Victor had authorized the transfers. Adrian confronted him privately. Victor denied everything. He claimed the evidence was fabricated. He accused Adrian of paranoia. Then he said something that changed everything. He told Adrian that the anonymous informant was probably someone with access to the executive floors. Someone who knew too much. Someone who could move around unnoticed. Someone like a cleaner. Adrian